inside a frozen cellar beneath Stalingrad's shattered Univermag department store. General Friedrich Paulus sits drafting surrender documents while 91,000 German soldiers wait to become prisoners, yet scattered across the city's ruins. Nearly 20,000 Wehrmacht troops refuse the order and continue fighting for another 48 hours. This is the strange mathematics of defeat. When Germany's most prestigious field commander capitulates on February 2, 1943, roughly 1 in 5 of his men simply ignore him and keep shooting. Why does an army that has just received permission to stop dying choose instead to fracture, resist, and bleed out in basement-to-basement combat that accomplishes nothing except its own annihilation? The answer lies not in ideology or courage, but in something far more mundane: the complete disintegration of command infrastructure, so total that tens of thousands of men never actually receive the order to surrender, while others who do receive it no longer recognize the authority of officers they haven't seen in weeks. The frozen Volga wind carries the stench of 147,000 unburied corpses through Stalingrad's skeletal apartment blocks on the morning of February 2, 1943. Temperatures hover at minus 26 degrees Celsius. Inside the pocket, rations have dropped to 75 grams of bread per day, less than 3 slices. The Sixth Army, which crossed into the Soviet Union 19 months earlier with 265,000 men, 100,000 horses, 3,400 artillery pieces, and 500 tanks, now occupies 16 square kilometers of rubble defended by soldiers whose average weight has dropped to 52 kilograms. Medical officers calculate that 94% of the remaining force suffers from frostbite, dysentery, typhus, or combinations thereof. The Luftwaffe's final supply mission landed 3 days ago. A single, Heinkel He-111 that delivered 180 kilograms of ammunition and 24 loaves of frozen bread to a besieged force requiring minimum 300 tons daily to maintain combat effectiveness. Paulus receives Stalin's ultimatum at 600 hours transmitted through Soviet field. Telephones jury-rigged into German communication lines. The document promises medical treatment, retained rank insignia, and eventual repatriation. We guarantee adequate rations and all wounded and sick will receive medical assistance, the text reads. Signed by Colonel General Konstantin Rokossovsky, commander of the Don Front. Paulus, promoted to General Feldmarschall by Hitler just 48 hours earlier specifically to encourage suicide, no German field marshal has ever surrendered, understands the promotion's implication. He also understands that 26,000 wounded men lie in cellars without anesthesia, while surgeons perform amputations using carpenter saws. His chief medical officer reports that gangrene kills an average of 480 soldiers daily, more than Soviet artillery. The smell inside the makeshift hospitals grows so overpowering that sentries posted at cellar entrances vomit into their frozen scarves. The pocket's fragmentation began January 26th, when Soviet 21st Army drove a corridor through the western perimeter, splitting the 6th Army into isolated strongpoints incapable of mutual support. General Karl Strecker's Ebeenth Corps holds the northern tractor factory district 3 kilometers from Paulus's headquarters, but might as well occupy a different planet. Radio communication collapsed when the last functioning generator ran out of fuel on January 29th. Messengers attempting to move between positions face Soviet snipers who have turned corpse collection into competitive sport. We stack German bodies as firing rests, writes Junior Lieutenant Vasily Zaitsev in his combat diary dated January 30th, 1943, held in the Central Museum of the Armed Forces, Moscow. Their frozen rigidity provides excellent stability for long-range shots. Between strongpoints, no man's land stretches across apartment blocks where Soviet and German positions exist on alternating floors of the same buildings, separated by barricaded stairwells and blocked elevator shafts. Inside the Univermag basement, Paulus's staff burns documents in a makeshift furnace constructed from filing cabinets. The temperature inside reaches 7 degrees Celsius, tropical compared to outside conditions. Officers destroy encoding machines, smash radio equipment, and puncture classified map cases. Lieutenant Colonel Wilhelm Adam, Paulus's adjutant, notes that the general's hands shake uncontrollably, not from cold but from nervous exhaustion. Paulus has slept perhaps 12 hours in the past week, sustained by benzodrine tablets that leave him simultaneously wired and incapable of coherent strategic thought. His left cheek twitches in an involuntary tic that worsens hourly. At 0730, Soviet tanks crash through the Univermag's ground floor. Red Army soldiers, fresh from the Siberian military district and acclimatized to cold that would kill their German opponents in minutes, pour through the wreckage. They find the basement command post defended by 6 men armed with pistols containing a combined total of 11 rounds. Paulus does not draw his weapon. The surrender ceremony lacks ceremony. Soviet Colonel General Mikhail Shumilov arrives expecting formal protocol and finds instead a cramped cellar reeking of excrement and gangrene. Paulus, wearing a Wehrmacht greatcoat stained with dirt and dried soup, signs capitulation documents with a fountain pen that freezes between signatures. His hands shake so badly that witnesses initially believe he's attempting to sabotage the document. "I surrender myself to the Soviet forces," he states in serviceable Russian, one of 3 sentences he can speak in the language. Translation difficulties compound the chaos. The official German text refers to suspension of hostilities, while the Russian version specifies unconditional surrender. This linguistic ambiguity will fuel decades of post-war legal disputes over whether Paulus technically broke his oath to Hitler. The general himself appears indifferent to such nuances, focused instead on negotiating medical evacuation for the 26,000 wounded still trapped in cellars. Shumilov promises priority treatment. The promise proves hollow. Barely 6,000 wounded will receive medical attention before infection or exposure kills the rest. 3 kilometers north, General Strecker receives news of Paulus's surrender via Soviet loudspeaker broadcast. His response electrifies the Wehrmacht officer corps for years afterward. The XI Corps will continue fighting. Strecker commands approximately 20,000 troops occupying the tractor factory complex and surrounding apartment blocks. His men possess 17 operational machine guns, 4 anti-tank rifles, and approximately 40,000 rounds of small arms ammunition, enough for perhaps 6 hours of sustained combat. They face 3 complete Soviet rifle divisions backed by 180 artillery pieces and 40 T-34 tanks. The mathematics of the situation allow exactly one conclusion, which Strecker systematically ignores. "We will defend this position until ammunition exhaustion," he radios to scattered subordinate units still maintaining communication. No surrender negotiations will be entertained. His motivations remain historically opaque. Some historians argue pure Prussian military professionalism. Others suggest Nazi fanaticism. Still others propose simple incomprehension that the war has already ended for the Sixth Army. The Soviet response demonstrates calculated brutality. Rather than waste infantry reducing the tractor factory pocket through room-to-room combat, Rokossovsky orders artillery saturation. For 6 hours on February 2nd, 120mm howitzers and 152mm gun howitzers pound the factory complex at a rate of 280 shells per minute. The barrage consumes 90,000 rounds, more than the Red Army fired during the entire first week of the Stalingrad battle. Soviet ammunition expenditure for this single afternoon exceeds the Wehrmacht's total artillery allocation for the entire pocket during January. The building complex, already reduced to skeletal frameworks by months of fighting, disintegrates into rubble fields where orientation becomes impossible. German survivors describe the sensation as living inside an earthquake that never stops. Eardrums rupture, lungs hemorrhage from overpressure. Men suffocate when cellar ceilings collapse and seal ventilation shafts. By 1800 hours, the tractor factory pocket ceases to exist as a military formation. Strecker, unconscious from concussion, is dragged from a collapsed command bunker by Soviet assault troops, who initially mistake him for a corpse. His surrender occurs without formal ceremony. He simply lacks consciousness to refuse. Scattered German survivors continue fighting until ammunition exhaustion forces individual capitulations. The last recorded German gunfire in Stalingrad occurs at 0340 hours on February 3, 1943, when an unnamed machine gunner in the factory's western sector fires his final belt into advancing Soviet infantry before attempting suicide. His pistol misfires. He survives to enter captivity, where dysentery kills him within 16 days. The statistical profile of surrender reveals warfare's grim accounting. Of 91,000 Wehrmacht prisoners, approximately 27,000 die within the first month from typhus, dysentery, and exposure during forced marches to prison camps. Soviet logistics, strained beyond capacity by the unexpected prisoner surge, cannot provide adequate calories. Daily rations in transit camps average 400 grams of bread and watery soup, barely subsistence level for sedentary prisoners, wholly inadequate for men already starved and frostbitten. Medical screening identifies 70,000 prisoners requiring immediate hospitalization. Soviet military hospitals possess 11,000 available beds. The mathematics produce predictable mortality. By 1955, when the last prisoners returned to Germany, barely 6,000 of the original 91,000 survive captivity. The death rate, 93.4%, exceeds even the horrific calculations of the Eastern Front's earlier encirclements. Inside interrogation rooms at NKVD headquarters, Soviet intelligence officers extract detailed organizational data from captured staff officers. They learned that the 6th Army entered Stalingrad with 17 infantry divisions, 3 motorized divisions, 3 panzer divisions, and 1 cavalry division. They discover that the Wehrmacht lost 900 aircraft attempting supply missions into the pocket, more planes than the Luftwaffe committed to the entire Battle of Britain. They document that the Luftwaffe delivered only 8,350 tons of supplies during the 72-day encirclement, less than 10% of minimum requirements. The intelligence bonanza provides Soviet military planners with comprehensive data on Wehrmacht tactical doctrine, equipment capabilities, and command structures that will inform Red Army operations for the remainder of the war. The rubble of Stalingrad holds secrets beyond immediate tactical value. Buried beneath collapsed buildings lie 750,000 civilian corpses, victims of artillery bombardment, starvation, and summary execution by both sides. The city that bore Stalin's name, renamed from Tsaritsyn in 1925, no longer functionally exists. Of 126,000 buildings standing in June 1942, approximately 400 remain structurally sound. The Volga shoreline, once dominated by riverside factories producing 40,000 tractors annually, resembles a lunar landscape of bomb craters and twisted steel. Reconstruction will require 7 years and consume 2.8 billion rubles, approximately 4% of the entire Soviet post-war industrial budget. February 2, 1943, does not mark the Eastern Front's turning point. That distinction belongs to Moscow in December 1941. When the Wehrmacht first discovered it could be stopped. Stalingrad instead represents something more fundamental. Proof that Germany's military machine could be systematically destroyed through attritional warfare that accepted staggering casualties as necessary cost. The Red Army suffered approximately 478,000 casualties, reducing the Stalingrad pocket more losses than the United States would sustain during the entire Pacific War, yet emerged strategically stronger. This mathematics of sacrifice, incomprehensible to Western military theorists raised on maneuver warfare doctrine, defined the Eastern Front's essential character. At Stalingrad, the Wehrmacht learned that courage, tactical skill, and individual soldier quality meant nothing against an enemy willing to trade 5 lives for 1 indefinitely, while fielding armies that grew larger each month. The frozen cellars beneath the WWII department store became a classroom where Germany's military aristocracy received its final education. Wars are won not by the side that fights most brilliantly, but by the side that can afford to keep fighting after brilliance no longer matters.